In the northern plains, June tornadoes are not anything extraordinary. Tornado Alley typically begins in the southern US around April, moving north and west into the central plains by May, and shifting all the way to the upper Midwest and northern plains by June. However, 2010 took June tornadoes to another level. In fact, out of all the months of June from 1999 to 2023, the year 2010 topped all others in terms of tornadic activity, with 325 tornadoes touching down in the US. Unfortunately, much of June 2010's tornadic outrage occurred on just a single day. Ripe environmental conditions on June 17th helped spawn over 70 tornadoes in the northern plains, 4 of which reached EF4 status in a very serious tornado outbreak largely forgotten in the tale of time. In this video, we'll uncover the intense tornadoes that unfolded, as well as the meteorology behind why this outbreak was so severe. On June 16th, an upper-level low descended across the Rockies and into the Great Plains. Strong southwesterly flow in the upper atmosphere contrasted the more southerly winds in the low to mid-levels, creating a large pocket of significant wind shear. However, only marginal instability and a relatively dry environment meant the possibility for supercells and a few tornadoes, but nothing too severe. Sure enough, although 18 tornadoes touched down that night, all but 4 of them were weak EF0s. One EF2 went through portions of Dupree, South Dakota, and several mobile homes were damaged, and another EF2 destroyed a few farm shacks, but fortunately nobody was killed on the night of the 16th. Once the last tornado touched down on the 16th, meteorologists kept their eyes peeled for more intense severe weather the following day. You see, while the low-level southerly winds were above average on the 16th, the 17th was on a completely different level, reeling in tons of moisture from the western Gulf of Mexico all the way to the Canadian border. Wind shear was also much stronger on the 17th, thanks to the repositioning of the upper-level trough. On the 16th, the trough was tilted positive, meaning that its axis moved from southwest to northeast. However, the following day, the trough swung into a negative tilt, instead extending from southeast to northwest, which greatly enhances the severe weather risk. Conditions were primed for discrete storms to fire, and the Storm Prediction Center issued a moderate risk of severe weather across most of Minnesota and Iowa. A hatched 10% tornado risk, which indicates the potential not just for a lot of tornadoes, but strong tornadoes as well, extended westward into North Dakota and southward into the upper Midwest. Even more eye-opening, though, were the probabilities of large hail and damaging winds, both of which racked an impressive 45% risk. The SPC noted the storm mode starting as discrete, with the potential for very large hail, before evolving into a more unified squall line with widespread damaging winds. Everything was on the table for a very significant severe weather outbreak, and residents across the upper plains waited anxiously for the afternoon storms to begin popping. The first tornado touched down near Hettinger, North Dakota at 9:35 a.m., while people were off at work doing what otherwise was a typical Thursday morning. This tornado, rated an EF1, only tracked for half a mile, yet shattered windows in an apartment building, causing $25,000 in damages. 5 hours later, the next tornado, a weak rope tornado, fortunately stayed over open fields in North Dakota. What intrigued meteorologists, however, were the locations of these initial tornadoes. In fact, the first 16 tornadoes of the outbreak, one of which included a massive EF4 that thankfully tore mostly through open crops and only destroyed a few structures, all formed within North Dakota. Forecasts, on the other hand, expected the first supercells to form slightly further south, near South Dakota and Nebraska. With the real-time tornado trends, the Storm Prediction Center expanded their tornado risk area further northwestward at around 3 p.m. local time, now encompassing much of North Dakota in the 10% zone, while keeping Minnesota and Iowa also within that 10% zone. This decision to expand the tornado risk was an extremely wise one, as numerous strong tornadoes sadly formed within the entire updated zone. Now, you may be wondering, why were there so many tornadoes all the way up into North Dakota? The answer lies in the Weather Prediction Center's surface analysis map, which highlights features like fronts, low pressure systems, and dew points. The surface low was located over North Dakota, and while storms fired southward along the cold front, where it is most typical, a sneaky occluded front, combined with moist air and strong wind shear, helped spawn another line of thunderstorms that featured many tornadic supercells. This line of storms progressed northeastward primarily in North Dakota, and these occluded front setups are often hard to forecast accurately. As the low-pressure system moved eastwards from North Dakota to Minnesota, one rotating thunderstorm eventually extended to the surface south-southwest of Wadena, Minnesota, just before 5 p.m. local time. A tornado warning was issued at that time, citing that both storm spotters and National Weather Service radar featured a dangerous tornado. The young twister produced a continually widening damage path as it moved straight towards Wadena, a town of 4,000 strong. At its peak, around the southwest Wadena residential area, the damage was over a mile wide, obliterating several homes and bringing down many industrial structures. The tornado also passed dangerously close to the elementary, middle, and high schools, all of which were located in the southwestern portion of the city. Several school buses and other vehicles were propelled through the air up to a few hundred feet, rendering them completely demolished as they fell back to the ground. The most dangerous feature of the Wadena tornado was that it was a multi-vortex tornado. This means that multiple vortices, or swirls of extremely intense wind, pivoted around a common center in an erratic way that caused extreme wind damage across a significant swath of land. The multi-vortex nature also meant that some houses were completely flattened, while neighboring homes faced only minor damages. As the tornado drove through Wadena paralleling Highway 71, consistent EF2 to EF3 damage continued, with more homes and businesses destroyed, and objects like this trampoline completely unrecognizable as they were tossed hundreds of feet. At this time, a tornado emergency, the most drastic version of a tornado warning indicating an imminent violent tornado, was issued for areas just north and east of Wadena, including the towns of Sebeka and Nimrod. Noted at the bottom of the alert was one grave sentence: "This tornado has a history of damage to the city of Wadena." Fortunately, the tornado began to weaken, causing little damage to any populated areas northeast of Wadena, and eventually dissipating quietly a few miles away from the town. Nonetheless, the damage trail left behind was incredible. Thankfully, and likely due to the prompt tornado warnings issued all throughout the tornado's path and even before it touched down, nobody was killed. "200 miles south-southeast of Wadena, the National Weather Service designated a radar-indicated tornado southwest of Conger, Minnesota. Just 4 minutes later, that report was verified by eyewitnesses on the ground. The storm quickly intensified as it hurried east-northeastward. EF3 damage was reported at a farmstead where a few barns were completely destroyed. At this time, the NWS noted the tornado to be large and extremely dangerous, heading directly towards Albert Lea. Soon after, the tornado veered slightly more northward, skirting just west of Albert Lea. Here, EF4 damage was reported to another farmstead, and other industrial structures like an energy plant were severely damaged by winds that packed gusts over 170 miles an hour. The tornado accelerated towards County Road 46, widening to almost half a mile wide and cleanly rotating a house off its foundation, spraying sheet metal all the way to nearby Interstate 90. Nearby, on County Road 74, one person was tragically killed and another severely injured when their farmhouse was significantly damaged. Fortunately, the tornado missed the heart of town and mostly tracked through open crops and fields with very sporadic homes and businesses. As a result, the Albert Lee tornado was documented by some insane tornado interceptions. Perhaps most jarring was this photo by Flickr user Mike and Lax, which features the iconic dead man walking photo eerily akin to the Gerald, Texas F5 that killed 27 people back in 1997. You can clearly see the mesovortices in this tornado, just like the one in Wadena, that swirl around a common center and intensify the potential wind damages. On top of the Wadena and Albert Lee EF4s, numerous other tornadoes left their mark, both literally and figuratively, across Minnesota and North Dakota. Out of the 4 EF4s that touched down the night of the 17th, the earliest touched down just before 3:45 p.m. north of Leaf Valley, Minnesota. It quickly intensified, prompting a tornado warning by means of both storm spotter observations and NWS Doppler radar. As the storm skirted just south of Almora, it tore down a few barns, sadly killing one person in this area. Then, EF4 damage was observed as a few homes were wiped from their foundations near County Road 143 in Bluffton, just a few miles away from Wadena. This storm was also the longest tracking tornado of the outbreak, extending almost 40 miles and carving a damage path 1.3 miles wide at peak. The most violent tornado in North Dakota was also an EF4, with peak winds estimated at a whopping 185 miles an hour. Touching down north of Mayville at 3:49 p.m., the twister headed due north, intensifying slowly and fortunately tracking over rural lands with little damage reported. At this time, both storm spotters and NWS radar once again agreed on the tornado touchdown, prompting the issuance of a tornado warning. As the storm approached Holmes, more extreme damage was inflicted where a home near Highway 15 was completely swept from its foundation and destroyed. Fortunately, nobody was killed by the tornado, but radar analysis indicated an extremely potent debris ball, indicating that debris from torn structures, vehicles, and crops were circulating well into the air and warranting the strong EF4 rating. Finally, a tornado near Mentor, Minnesota, prompted a tornado emergency for a line of severe storms which produced multiple tornadoes near the Mentor region. The dire NWS warning highlights damage to a Cenex gas station and convenience store in Mentor, where one person was sadly killed. That person was the store owner, who sacrificed his life by alerting his family members that were with him at the gas station about the tornado and covering his daughter while the family took cover. Across its 17-mile track, reports of significant damage garnered an EF3 rating for the tornado. It's sometimes difficult to look at past storms and believe that they impacted real people, just like us, with unique homes and families and everyday lives. These everyday lives needed to be rebuilt after the violent tornadoes that night, and if there's any benefit to the terrible destruction and loss of life these tornadoes bring, it's the community and togetherness in the aftermath that prevails through all hardship. Less than a month after the Albert Lee tornado, new houses were already undergoing construction, and public assistance from FEMA allowed for the swift recoveries in hundreds of towns across the otherwise tranquil Northern Plains landscape. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have a personal story or recollection of the June 17, 2010 tornado outbreak, please leave it in the comments below.